This week on Barbell Shrugged is the first of a 5-part video series on the Olympic lifts. Today, we're going to be talking about how to get started.
It is a big year for weightlifting. This fall, the World Championships are coming to Houston, Texas. The timing couldn't be more perfect. And with new athletes flooding in the gyms everywhere to master the Olympic lifts, the snatch, clean, and jerk, the sport is in revival. But where did it all start? The roots of this sport stretch back to ancient times, when athletes lifted stones and clubs, and strength training was the subject of Greek myth. In more recent years, strongmen have captivated crowds with feats of strength. But it was the advent of the barbell that made the modern sport of weightlifting possible. Calibrated steel has spread the lifts around the world, built Olympic heroes, and has inspired a new generation of athletes to step out onto the platform. Now, it's your chance to join the story. Welcome to the Weightlifter's Journey, Part 1.
Shaka, everybody.
Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Mike Bledsoe, standing here with Doug Larson, Chris Moore, CTP behind the camera, and Charlotte. Today, we are kicking off the first epic. We're actually
adventure.
doing a series. We're going to do a series of shows on weightlifting, Olympic-style weightlifting at that. And today we're going to talk about how to get started with the Olympic lifts, and we're going to kind of talk about the history of weightlifting and how it got us to where we are now.
Because that's how you know where you're going.
Right, guys? Look at where you've
By
been.
knowing the history?
You look at where you've been and to find out where
Shakespeare
you're going.
said the best history is prologue to the future, right?
Charlotte told me Shakespeare may have been making all that shit up and that it was some dude named, what was his name?
You're ruining the fact
Marlowe.
I was trying to sound smart with a quote, and there
Marlowe.
you come with history.
The poet.
Well, I'm
All
just
right.
saying it may have been Marlowe, not Shakespeare.
Make sure you go to barbellshrug.com, sign up for the newsletter, check out what's happening over there. Every day I hear there's people that don't know that there's a website where stuff is happening. Sometimes people are like, oh, I'd like to get one of those T-shirts or something.
What do
Guess
you mean
It's
you
on-
offer awesome information
it's
on
on
the
the
reg
website.
daily?
Yeah. So, anyways, there's also blogs over there. Chris Moore, he cultivates this
I like that.
blog that is just amazing.
The
It's the
cultivator-
best on the internet right now.
And you know what? We're going to make it better. In fact, all this effort, you referenced a 5-part series. We're really putting a lot of effort in making this show even better. People can get their minds around that. Just get ready. Be titillated. The expectation should be titillating you right now. Just all over your titillating zones.
All right, let's talk about how weightlifting got started. I mean, it didn't just start with CrossFit. It didn't just start with weightlifting as we know it now. It started ancient Greece.
Well, I think people they know the most recent history. They know it's been the Olympics and stuff, but that kind of displaces the fact that since there have been humans, strength's been a thing. And that we have prepared for labor and for work and for battle, of course, by any means necessary. So I think pretty early on, hundreds, thousands of years ago, humans realized that adding a little bit of resistance seemed to allow you to do more. So that idea has been around a long time. I guess we've been on this long march towards refining that, which is where we're kind of getting to that point now. We're reaching a new stage. But yeah, the history is really long and deep, and it's really fascinating. A cool book I will point out to people, Peter McAllister, Manthropology. A really cool book. I've referenced it before, but he goes all over the historical history where man has used tools, become, he'd say manlier, but really it's like, how do you cultivate strength, prepare for battle? Stones, implements, clubs of all kinds, even the original form of yoga. We've talked to Seal Fit and oh god, Mark Devine. I almost lost it from. Don't forget Mark's name, but talk about how really the roots are in preparing yourself for work and battle. Even with yoga, it's really cool.
Yeah. If you think about hundreds of years ago, before they had nice Eleiko barbells, Rogue barbells, and whatnot, to prove you were the strongest person, you would just grab any random odd implement, rocks, logs or whatever around you, and you would just see who could take it off the ground and put it over your head. If I get over my head and you can't, then I'm stronger. And that's the highest you could lift something. So I feel like with the snatch and the clean and jerk, the old way they used to do it wasn't exactly like you see the snatch and the clean and jerk today. It was originally, I think this started in the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but 140 or so years ago, before the Olympics started, maybe right when the Olympics was starting, like late 1800s.
The second foundation of the Olympics, a new form, like the rebirth of the Olympics, what they called it.
Like
modern
day Olympics. Yeah, not like ancient Greek Olympics, but like modern Olympics. The first modern Olympics was like 1896, if I'm not mistaken, and they had two events. One of them was the two hands anyhow. It was just pick up the thing and put it over your head with two hands, and then there was pick up the thing and put it over your head with one hand. So I don't even think they had barbells at that point. Was that?
I think you guys almost like dumbbells with like shot.
Like the big bowling balls on the edge is what they look like.
Yeah, there's some barbells, but from what I've seen, the issue is consistency. Sometimes they're thick, sometimes they're thin. They're going to break all the time. They are hollow. They're iron. They're whatever. So any one day you can lift and get stronger, but consistency from event to event and everything, that was still a very rough idea.
It was more of a strongman type environment. Like if you go and look at some of the history, it's like anything that was like pre-1950s almost looked like what they were doing was strongman stuff. Like if you go to a strongman event now, they're taking the single dumbbell and putting it overhead, and that's something that's not really trained for much anymore.
There's that cool golden age, right, where from this old stuff we're talking about, it becomes like circus events and ways to impress people at carnivals. It becomes a way of demonstrating and entertaining.
Yeah, they were freaks.
Yeah, and guess what?
They weren't like heroes like they are now.
And people assume that this is old and that they were maybe not quite as strong. Their strength, Louis Cyr and those guys, Eugene Sandow, right? That first bodybuilder guy who became the first popularizer of squat movement. These are cool things we've referenced and seen before in the bodybuilding.com video from our friends over that Corey Gregory and his team Muscle Farm helped put together and everything. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, Corey and John Bros was in that too.
Very cool
both
video.
guests have been on the show before.
Yeah, you get more detail there, but you see a stepwise emergence of the barbell slowly. It hadn't always been there, but people were still finding ways to be really, really, really strong and muscular. But it's cool to see how it didn't really start taking shape as a modern tool of developing strength and maybe, I'd also argue, human potential until like maybe, would you say the 30s or?
It was something around the 30s, I want to say.
Yeah.
That's a guess, but I'm pretty sure that's close to right.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be like it is now either, where it had to be like one fluid lift from the floor to the shoulders and then overhead for the clean and jerk, or one fluid lift overhead, locked out elbows, like a clean lift. It used to be kind of more like Mike was saying, a strongman type movement where they just had to get it overhead any way they could, and then slowly standards evolved. There was actually 3 Olympic lifts until like the 70s, I want to say, where it used to be clean and press.
I think people forget that.
That wasn't that long. That wasn't that long ago.
Big controversy. People also, I guess, want to see it brought back for a lot of reasons. But yeah, clean and press was awesome movement.
Yeah, I mean, it turned into like you can look these pictures up online. It turned almost into like a standing bench press in some cases. Where they would clean to the shoulders, and then they would kind of do like a little bit of a little heave, and so they would heave, and then they would kind of come back with it. But you'll see pictures of people.
Well, they weren't allowed to bend their knees. Like,
well, yeah, they would be
so
here,
they would do some weird
knees
stuff.
locked, and then they would like hinge at their back, and they would be like pressing the weight like
literally
this,
turning it into a bench
hundreds
press.
of pounds, 400 pounds. I don't know if that 500 pounds is probably.
I want to say there was a 500-pound clean and press at one point. Yeah, and those guys, I don't think it's a healthy way to go.
Yeah, like Alexiev and Shamirkin,
Serge Redding was my favorite
Redding.
presser. Serge Redding could clean and press over 500 pounds.
Jeez.
The only guy I've ever seen do that is the contemporary Zadrunas Savickas, my favorite strongman. It's about a person who can press, not jerk, not push from rack, not front squat, which is still really good. 500-pound front squat is still really great, but to press just strictly 500 pounds is so impressive. But there have been beasts around for a really long time. And what I dig about that, Doug, is specifically about weightlifting, it seems like it has emerged even separate from the other strength sports because it represents something a little different. Yes, you want to lift the most amount of weight, but what I see in that sport, independent of the actual lifts, is that there's an inner purpose, an intent behind weightlifting to find the most, you could say, beautiful, elegant, efficient way to move in order to get the load overhead. Like gymnastics is regulated by, there's a certain way you're going to do this. That's the right way. That's the efficient way. That allows you to do these movements. Well, a heavy snatch is a fine-tuned representation of how a human can best get underneath a load in that one movement. So I think it's so special and unique. That's something that took me a while to really appreciate, coming from the raw strength powerlifting background, and really get that that's the purpose.
Yeah, when done right, it's a beautiful thing, and it actually doesn't look heavy. You can see a guy that's a 69-kilo lifter snatch 170, and it doesn't look that heavy, and then you think about, well, shit, that's over 350 pounds. Like, what does that feel like to deadlift? And then you think about that guy being like 50 pounds lighter than you, and him just throwing overhead like it doesn't even look hard, and how much respect you have for that person for just being that fucking crazy athletic. Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah, and then the movements coming along, like, they couldn't be refined until like the modern barbell came along. So it's like a lot of the variation from like competition to competition, from athlete to athlete, they're using different stuff. Or when we talked to Aleko, when we did that show, they were talking about how the bars were breaking. Like, they couldn't even finish a competition. They were having to, like, change out barbells.
Can you imagine trying to do a CrossFit class? Like, technology wouldn't allow CrossFit to be a thing. Like, every time somebody dropped a snatch, like, fuck, man, this is really expensive. Every set, I got to get new.
Or they were like truck axles that were, this big around, just like an axle that you would actually find, buying an axle barbell that really is this big around, that came from it actually coming out of a truck originally, or like with like wagon wheels on the side of it that are made out of cast iron steel. Like Paul Anderson, one of the first guys
to 1,200 pounds. It works.
Yeah, he squatted well over 1,000 pounds. Like, he did it. I forget what the stat is on him. He did like over 900 or over 1,000 like every day for like some ungodly amount of time, for like a year or years or something like that, just because he could. And one of the interesting things about him was he was one of the guys that very, very similar to like the ancient story of Milo, where he did kind of progressive resistance training. The story of Milo basically goes, if the audience hadn't heard this, where this guy named Milo would carry around a calf, like a not quite fully developed cow, and the cow would get bigger. He would carry it every day, and as it got bigger, he got stronger, and that was kind of like the theory behind how progressive resistance training got started. Well, similar to that in a way, Paul Anderson, the story goes, he would have a bar attached to two big, like 55-gallon barrels full of water or full of rocks or lead or whatever he put in them, and then what he would do is he would stand in the middle of it, and he would do like a very small quarter squat, and then he would dig a hole underneath his feet to make it where he would dig a hole underneath the barrels to make it where they would move down, and he would squat under it, and he would increase the range of motion with the same weight over time, and that's how he got stronger, squatting well over 1,000 pounds many, many times. So it was a different way to do progressive resistance training before we had squat racks and plate-loaded bars and whatnot. If you only have just two big barrels and you just attach a big bar in between them, then you can't really adjust the weight quite as easy. So he adjusted the range of motion over the course of many days.
It doesn't seem like inventing a squat rack is like oh shit, mind-blowing technology.
I mean, in hindsight, I think the same thing about Velcro, man.
Yeah, like, really, they didn't just think, how about we make something we could put this on?
Or like,
I wonder how long it took before
bend
that
over
happened.
sideways.
People wrote with
we haven't
pens.
even mentioned that yet.
People wrote with bird feathers and ink for hundreds of years and shit, man. Of course, it took a long time to figure out a squat rack. Shit is not obvious.
Well, I mean, they started squatting like maybe early 1900s with a barbell. What did it take 20, 30 years ago? Oh, man, we should like set this on something.
Well,
so we could start at the top.
Maybe a side bend hoist is not the most efficient way to set up for your squat. Like, if you pop your back before you even get in the position to do the lift, you can see that there's room for refinement in what you're doing.
Or maybe they thought about it like when they first were invented, like, oh, there's that guy using the rack. What a poon.
Just get it was cheating. Like
it's like
the rack is the kipping pull up. Yeah, it's like guys cheating.
Honestly, I will say that's funny, and I'm almost certain that's got to be true. Like, if you go back and see what happened, like, look at this guy over here. Thinks he's
the
too
rack.
good for a back bend or side press.
Well, what they used to do, to CTP's point from a minute ago, what they used to do before we had racks and before they were doing the dig the hole in the ground thing, which I'm sure some people did do that before they did this, but they took a straight bar once they had them, and they would stand them vertically on one end, and then once they were vertical, they would grab the bar like this, put it on their back, and then they would rock it into a full squat and then stand up. They would squat, 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 and then they would do the same thing and put it back on one end, and that's how they got it onto their back. So
If I bend over like that to like pick up anything, I'd hurt.
Well, you're not a trained strongman with a single arm single.
Oh my jeez.
No kidding.
Yeah. But the cool thing, like we're saying, is the barbell comes along, and I think the beauty of it is that basically it's like a printing press type thing where strength can come to the masses, because now we have, especially as the equipment gets better and they don't break, one kind of thing that usually weighs about the same, holds the same size weights, can be loaded for your grandmother who's picking up for the first time or for a strong man picking up 800 pounds.
Yeah.
All in between. It's standard. And then the cool thing is now people can go, I see what's working for lots of people. Maybe this works for everybody. I can capture it in a book. I can spread this information. I can start spreading how to train more effectively. And that, to me, that's a huge revolution point, like a big tipping point
Just
in the
having
history of
discs.
sport.
They took the barbells,
Yeah.
were able to put discs on it.
We take it
instead
for
of
granted
shot.
now, but that's just a temporary thing, a contemporary thing, rather. Very recent
Made
development.
it much more convenient to train and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, we have the barbell, and then it's, we were putting like shot in the ends and like just kind of adding it in and having to do that. We got the squat rack, and then Aleco came along, and I guess one of the guys there was saying that was working at
well, did the female lead that? I forget. Well,
No,
1954 was the date, right?
57. It
57.
was one of the
were making
one of the
toasters.
guys was working there.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
doing waffle irons, and he was like, "Oh, we should make these barbells because they're always breaking." They invent like the modern barbell in 57, and with that, like things got to take off for the sport of weightlifting. And so like a lot of rules that existed back then were like the bar can't touch your body on the way up. And so we were talking earlier about like gymnastics and how like fluid that looks, and how weightlifting used to not be that way. It was more of like a brute strength from A to B type of thing. And because now the barbells they turn when you move, and they started
You can grip them
and then,
better.
and then yeah, they actually put knurling on the bar, and then they changed the rules where it can touch your body, and now like the movements, now there's like debates over how the movements have been, but like the snatch and the clean and jerk that we see now, we've only been doing them that way for like 40 years, like 30-40 years. That's been the competition.
And I'm
So
sure
it's
they'll
not
continue.
that
They'll
long,
continue
and
to
that's-
change. I mean,
that's why like things are actually still changing, and I think they're changing at a really rapid rate, because before, like back in the 70s, 80s, even in the 90s, it was like all these countries had these coaches that had developed these athletes, and everything was a secret, especially like Eastern
man.
Europe and Russia and all that. Like
I can remember
like,
watching the
everything was a
1996
secret.
games. Did you watch those games? That's the first time
Yeah.
I really watched weightlifting intently. You had to stay up like 3 o'clock in the morning to catch the replays of the weightlifting, because they don't show it. It's always so infuriating. That's the first time I saw like Andre Chamerkin, these big Ronnie Weller for Germany, like my favorite super heavies in recent history. All these lifters, Pierce Dimas, battling it out and doing things that I really didn't understand at the time. I was like, I've tried to do this in gym, well, like not gym, but in a high school gym, Nasium, trying to learn like a power clean, and I'm doing like 135, and I know what it looks like even then. Like this doesn't look like what that looks like. I remember seeing
this
it as,
makes this look really easy.
yeah,
fast.
and then I remember thinking next, like these Russians, these
Is that Pyrrhus?
no, I don't know.
Someone said it
Looks
was.
kinda like him.
These Russians,
Yeah,
the
it looks like
Germans, like the secrecy, Soviet Union. Oh, and then a few years after that, when I'm in college, I get into the Soviet text and I geek out on the secrecy, which in hindsight created false walls for a long time that I think really mystified and improved the sport maybe for a while for the time, but it's only now that that's been removed and we've seen an explosion in the
Yeah, I've
popularity.
seen it feels like a lot of that mysticism has been removed just the last few years. We have the internet has come along, and coaches are now, who have hung out with the Bulgarian coaches and stuff like that. I go, oh, this is exactly what they told me when I trained with them. This is exactly how it was. So like the advent of the internet, and then YouTube videos. I mean, when
And
we
now
first
Instagram, which has been, I think, has only accelerated
Oh,
the
yeah.
reach of quick weightlifting education. Maybe even compared to anything else I've seen on Instagram. People like Diane Fu sharing video instruction and tips through that medium. I think it's just a viral explosion in how many people can pick up and then learn weightlifting.
Yeah, and
it's nuts.
And that Doug Larson guy and Alex Macklin dude on Technique Wad. They really
I'll tell you
good.
what. Oh boy.
And I'm jealous. So, like, in one way, I'm jealous because when we first discovered weightlifting, there was like no YouTube channel to go check it out.
Comparative Stone Age.
There was like
Really?
VHS tapes, man. You had to put
right.
and you had to like know to hunt those down. There wasn't like a Google search.
I used to watch
you
had to watch Strawson's videos
better?
from Iron Mind.
So
Yeah,
like,
we would go over to Brian Schilling's house and spend all Sunday afternoon like eating angel food ice cream, loading up because you know it's important. Window games, maybe we didn't know that then though. But watching Iron Mind videos of all these like Bulgarian training camp videos, going, oh my god!
I remember watching the 1998 training hall tapes from the World Championships like on VHS. And I was like so lucky to have it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, even knowing that existed was crazy. And
then you show those videos in your class to your college class, like check it out. These people are doing this. You're like, what in the shit is this? Like they're seeing this. They don't
when
understand
I first
what's
discovered
going
weightlifting,
on.
I had no idea. I was like, what?
They bench
This is
too?
awesome.
No bench.
So
no
describe
bench.
the day you learned about weightlifting the first time.
Yeah, so I had been it was in 2006, and I had been training since like 90. How old is I? 96.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd been training for like 10 years. Most of my workouts were coming out of Flex magazine or whatever.
Righteous.
Yeah. And then I had to take this class in school for exercise science degree, and it was like weightlifting 101. I was like, all right, whatever. I know what I'm doing. I walk in, and it's like, here's the PVC pipe. We're going to go over snatch. And I was like,
You kidding me, bro?
and that day I stayed like late after class, and I fell in love with it. But there was like no real resources at the time either. It's like the only person I could learn weightlifting from at that point was Dr. Brian Schilling, who I was extremely
No resources. Stuck with Schilling.
except for Schilling.
All of this fucking expert.
Schilling's awesome.
But what I was gonna say is, if you let me finish. But like, is like I really lucked out because we got to hang out with a guy who probably knew more about it than almost anybody in the United States, and so it was just like really, really fortunate. So like we were all kind of like just happened to be in the right place at the right time, which is great.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know Doug had the more ideal than you and I situation. Where
We're all jealous of Doug.
I was very, very lucky growing up. But in '96, or sorry, in 2006 also, that's when I showed up to University of Memphis and started training with Brian as well. And that took what I had already done for the previous 10 or so years. Because I originally learned about the Olympic lifts at a Bigger, Faster, Stronger convention when that was probably 97, I want to say. I was probably like 13, 14 at the time. And then I had done it for about 8 or 9 years. And I was like 80, 90% proficient, but there were still a few details that I hadn't quite ironed out yet. And Schilling and Lauren Chu, they both helped me really perfect and refine those last few things to where now my lifts really haven't changed much in the last 10 years or so after getting those last little tweaks.
Yeah. We've seen it explode since then. I kind of like watched. I remember CrossFit came along, and my buddy showed it to me. I was like, "Oh, there's weightlifting, and then they're doing box jumps, and then wall balls, and kipping pull-ups is very interesting." So I started looking into that. I was like, "This is a lot of fun." But I saw an explosion. I mean, we all got to watch the explosion of weightlifting through CrossFit and the internet, and we all know that like that helped really fuel the whole thing.
Referring to it in past tense, I think it's still an unfolding explosion. I don't know how long it'll be before it slows down because, like I said, it's building and ramping up in this country. We have the World Championships coming in Houston later this fall, ramping up to that. The fallout of that event, where I think this podcast and our efforts willing, we're going to try to shed as much light on that as possible to get in the Houston area, in the Texas area, in the southern area of the United States, everybody within flying distance come there and see up front what this sport looks like.
Oh, it's going to be the best highest in the world.
Last year you had to go to fucking Kazakhstan for this experience, right, or whatever, or you had to go to
Very nice.
a big time. It hasn't been here in a while. It might not come back, and who knows when it'll be back. So this is an event that we're bearing witness to that we need to get on board of. And if you are a young person interested in lifting, time is fucking perfect, I'd say.
Yeah, it is a really good opportunity. Like it's not in the United States very often, as you said, simply because weightlifting is more popular in most other areas of the world. But now, again, because CrossFit came in and helped popularize weightlifting, I think it's more likely to be in the United States in the future. But still, it's the World Championship, so it's going to be all around the world all the time. So it might not come back to the U.S. for 5, 10, or even more years. So that's a super good opportunity to go watch the World Championships. It's it's a cool event. It's a couple $100 to go to, like any other cool event would be, and you get to watch the best weightlifting in the world. We're going to be there. We'll probably throw a big party. Come party with us in Houston in November.
We're going to go see.
We have an
you got to go see Alien Ilya set a world record. I don't know about you, but it seems pretty cool.
All right, let's take a break real quick. When we come back, we're gonna talk about.
Doug wants to say something.
Yeah, maybe we should let
I was
Doug
gonna, I was
talk,
going to
yeah.
say we're working on getting our audience a discount on World Weightlifting
yeah.
Championship tickets. If you enter the code word Shrugged when you check out, you get some type of a discount. I haven't finalized that yet, but that should be
How the hell
coming
did
up
you
very,
swing
very.
that?
I called him up.
Nice.
Yeah.
We asked.
Yeah, nice.
There's crazy
That's all you
things
gotta do is
happen.
ask sometimes.
Excuse me, sir. Can we come up with a favorable arrangement to help promote your event and offer some sweet benefits to our audience?
I figured we're
Well,
going
thank you.
to be there. We want our audience to come. If we can get a few percentage off of tickets for our audience, then more people will come. We want you to come. It'll be fun.
Everyone flight has to be
It
there.
will be a party.
Yeah.
All right, take a
When we
break.
come back, we're gonna talk about the challenges new weightlifters face when trying to get in the sport of weightlifting.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Alex Macklin here, Barbell Shrug coach and weightlifter. You might remember me from some of the technique WOD videos on the snatch and the clean and jerk, or you might see me in the flight guide or in the videos that we've done on the flight weightlifting program. But anyways, just wanted to tell you a quick story today. So back in January of 2012, me, CTP, Bledsoe, we and a couple other guys, we drove over to ETSU in Johnson City, Tennessee, where I competed in my very first Olympic weightlifting meet. So what you're about to see today is the story behind that very first meet, which I ended up telling on the very first episode of Barbell Shrugged podcast. So episode number 1. So yeah, I've been around for a little while, weightlifting for a little while, and weightlifting has taught me a lot of things. I think the most important thing that weightlifting has taught me is that you've got to put all your effort into pursuing what you're passionate about, following your passion. If you're doing anything less than that, you're not doing that, you're just wasting your time, you're wasting your life. It's not going to be easy every single day, and you might have doubts. It certainly wasn't easy for me, and I definitely had a lot of doubts. But if you put your hard work, towards something you're passionate about, it's going to pay off, and you're going to be successful. It's really crazy to think about, where weightlifting has taken me. I'm able to. It's allowed me to discover this new career with Barbell Shrugged and helping people all over the place with weightlifting. So I never thought that I'd be able to do that. And so you never know where your passions, whatever it is, can take you. So anyways, that's all I've got to say. So I hope you guys enjoy this video.
And we're back.
Whoa, you get scared?
Yeah, I did actually a little bit. I was like, oh, what am I talking
You
about?
jumped.
I blacked out there at the break. What happened?
Yeah, we were just talking about how internet CrossFit has kind of helped make this a big boom, but at the same time, like, even though it's brought like this big awareness around weightlifting, I feel like it's actually gotten more confusing. So you you have this big discovery process where it's like, oh, these people are doing it in CrossFit. A lot of gyms have a weightlifting team now. A lot of people don't want to do the CrossFit as much, and they want to start doing weightlifting, and they don't know exactly where to go because in the beginning there was one place to go, and that was like the CrossFit stuff. If CrossFit was the way you found it, or you found your one coach or the one coach that was in town, there's like, oh, this is exactly where I get it from. For us, there was like not a lot of that confusion. But now when someone discovers weightlifting, there are so many places you can go. You can jump on almost any blog. There's probably hundreds of blogs out there where you can just go.
Rabbit hole in it.
There's a workout listed that day, and you can just start doing it.
It's information overload right now. It's not that they can't find the information. It's that they find too much information. They don't know how to filter through it and figure out which is the actual high-quality information, what's kind of average, and what's actually not very good. And if you're a beginner, it's really hard to distinguish between those three levels. It all looks kind of the same.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, it's kind of hard sometimes if you have a coach who thinks they're really, really good, but they're actually kind of average, but they don't know the difference themselves. They're so new that they think that they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I've seen that many times. I've gone into CrossFit gyms, and the coach teaching weightlifting, I can tell they've only been doing it since they started doing CrossFit 2 years ago as well, and they are kind of okay by poor CrossFit standards. CrossFit has high standards, but like people that go into CrossFit don't have the same view of weightlifting that weightlifters have of weightlifting.
Right.
That's why the standards aren't quite as clean with press outs and whatnot. But people will come in as a brand new lifter, and they'll see someone who looks better than them and just has some amount of confidence in how they're talking about it, and they'll think that that's the right way to do it. And then you see a bunch of people doing snatches, but they look like they're about to do deadlifts, and then all of a sudden it goes over their head in kind of a funky, wonky fashion.
Yeah.
And having those bad habits established from the beginning makes it almost harder to learn it down the line. It'd be way easier if you just learned it right the very first time.
Yeah, and talking about like where people kind of categorize themselves as beginner, intermediate, advanced, and I don't think I've ever met anybody who was doing weightlifting for less than 3 years who would be considered intermediate. Like if you haven't been doing weightlifting for specifically weightlifting, not you had snatches and clean and jerks in your workouts every once in a while, like you actually train the lifts, it takes 2 or 3 years to get out of that beginner phase. And a lot of people think that they may be intermediate or advanced, and they're not quite to that point because of who they may be comparing themselves to.
Yeah, less than 3 years is probably beginner. That 3 to 10 is probably the intermediate phase. 10 plus years, you're probably an expert. 15 plus years, you might consider yourself to be elite. As far as knowing what is right and what is wrong, maybe you never actually went to the World Championships, so you're not technically elite as far as strength goes. But if you've been coaching it and doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, then compared to the rest of the population, you're probably still in like the top 0.001% or what have you.
Yeah, so this is like a really new problem is when we discovered weightlifting, it came from a coach. There was no one else in town to learn it from. We had one resource, no confusion. Now you get online, and there's hundreds, and so it's like hard to choose.
More chances to get lost in the rabbit holes.
Yeah, and it does create a lot of confusion. So I actually can't imagine what that's like because didn't have to go that myself. But I see it as a problem now. I talk to a lot of athletes, and they're like, 1 month they're doing this blog, the next month they're doing that blog.
Right.
And it's just like, they're like, I can't figure out why I'm not making progress, and they think it's a strength issue. And it's like, you've never.
This is just like any other
taken
sport,
it back,
right?
you know?
I mean, it's not that much different than what if you were trying to be a basketball player or a football player or any other sport where there's a lot of technique to bring into you and then to get clear on. There's a lot of history to learn, a lot of plays, and all this context. You had to live like that athlete.
Yeah.
Anybody good at those sports doesn't, within 2 years, maybe in rare occasions, you don't jump from I just picked up a football to now I'm playing NFL, which people expected themselves for some reason when they're trying to reshape their body and learn weightlifting. It's just it's not reasonable.
It's easy for us right now to see something online and know if it's good or bad information because we have context, we have experience, we have knowledge of what's actually good and what's not good. But for any other category, if I'm learning about something that's relatively new to me, something more obscure right now, I'll say like I've been researching Bitcoin. Or something that's like new to the world, new to me. And when I go to research Bitcoin, I'm like, okay, well, I'm reading an article about it. Is this like some random dude that just learned about it and he's just writing like a blog post, or is this like some guy that actually really knows what he's talking about because he's like one of the people that's developing it? I don't know. And so in that case, it's really, really hard for me to distinguish because I just don't know that much about it in general and I'm brand new to it. So I like to look at things like that. That way I can project what it's like for someone who's brand new to a CrossFit gym to see how it feels to them to come into this new environment where they don't really know what's going on. That way I can have that experience of being a novice or being a beginner, and it gives me context to help people where I happen to be the expert and they're the novice or the beginner.
Yeah. Another challenge that I see with a lot of weightlifters, and I've experienced myself, is self-doubt. Is like, I think a lot of times I think the biggest point for me personally was like most self-doubt when it came to competing. Mm-hmm. You go to a competition, you feel like everybody else in the room knows exactly what's going on, and they have coaches, and like you don't know.
That's what everybody feels too.
And
by
then,
the way.
yeah, and that's like I remember going and like when we first started competing, like we'd have our coach there sometimes, but not always, and it was just like. And it's one of those things you start looking at what's happening, how the other coaches are interacting with the athletes.
Oh, it gets in your head quick.
And it's like, oh, why are they slapping them on the ass? I don't get slapped on the ass.
Hey, Doug,
is that right?
Can you slap me on the ass before I go out there? Sure, okay. Can you rub my earlobes just like that guy's doing over there?
Yeah, like there's so many different styles. And then you get to weightlifting meet, and then now you have this timer that's going on, and people are changing weights, and you thought you were going, and now you're not. And like for me, like when I was first weightlifting and going to competitions, it was like very unsure of like what was going on.
Well, also
and it took a while to settle in.
You had this history where you were not a rookie to lifting. You know about basic ideas, nutrition, training, all that. But you said like when you get into the training hall, where in this case we had laboratory equipment and force plates and weightlifting platforms, and the people teaching you were Dr. Lauren Chu, Dr. Brian Schilling, Dr. Fry, these people who their whole life had been the study of mechanics and physiology and everything that goes into weightlifting, and their passion was weightlifting, and this was new to you. A lot of people probably in gyms feel that when they have their coach showing them this thing, and they just feel sort of maybe small and really greenhorn in comparison to what they know.
I definitely felt that way when I first started weightlifting. I started in like the summer of 2006, and I got to train with Brian Schilling like exclusively. Like you were in there doing powerlifting, but you weren't really paying much attention to me at the time, I don't think.
Really?
And
who's this guy? He's so pale. God, so pale. Barbell won't save that.
Doesn't even have a beard yet.
This guy needs a beard more than anybody. That's what I thought at the time.
How does he expect to be strong?
When then like Doug and Andy show up like 2 months later, there was others that showed up, and then Mike Falvo was there and like would show up at times, and like these guys would show up that had way more experience than I ever had, and I'm like, oh, like I felt really good about my lifting until they showed up, and then I was like, oh shit. This is embarrassing. I definitely had like insecurity at that point, and I know that keeps people from like jumping in the gym and trying something like snatch and clean and jerk.
That's probably the first time you'd ever been in a weight room recently, and you are the least experienced person there. Like the number one least experienced, because you were brand new, and all the rest of us have been doing it for years and years.
Yep.
Yeah, like even I don't want to leave Corey out of this. He's probably watching this right now. Like, what about me?
Oh, your friend
no one mentioned
too.
me.
He was fairly new too.
He's Canadian.
Corey was fairly new at that point, if I remember correctly. But he probably had been around since he'd been in that program for over a year at that point. He at least had like 1 year experience. And the difference between 1 year and 0 is a pretty large gap. So in that case, that's probably a very unique experience for you, being brand new when everyone else is very experienced. And in that case, like you probably can use that experience to project what it's like for someone coming brand new into CrossFit and brand new into weightlifting, because you really have been there where you were the number one least experienced person in the gym at some point, so you know what it's like.
Yeah, I actually was getting I remember one day I was getting input from like you, Andy, Schilling. Like 3 or 4 people would come by and like give me advice on like 2 snatches.
Yeah,
and I was like,
too many cooks in the kitchen.
It's one of those days I was like, everyone shut the fuck up. Just no one talk to me for the rest of the day. I'm just gonna lift. Leave me alone. And it's like
usually when that happens, someone's like, why don't you just like extend your first pull just a little bit, and then the person after them is like, you probably need to cut that a little bit shorter, and you're like, fuck.
It was like one of those things where like everyone gave me something different, and I was like,
they are fucking with me right now.
Well, another thing though. So sorry, Chris. Another thing is that there's just too much. It's not that there's just too much info, but that it's just highly technical in itself. And then especially if you're coming from CrossFit, it's just like damn, man, how am I going to squeeze this in when I'm worrying about everything else? So
Right.
you're not getting like it's like a lot of info to like digest on top of not having proper time to just focus on that thing.
I guess that would be the equivalent to now, like people getting coached by multiple coaches at one time would be the same as like jumping from blog to blog and reading different coaches' text on or watching different videos, or it'd be the same as going to seminars back to back where they're teaching different techniques or using different terminology to explain how to do the lifts properly. I think a lot of times people stack information too much different information too close to each other. They don't give it a chance to like settle in.
It reminds me like reading books. Like you could pick all these books off a shelf and they're all random, written by different people. How they fit together in one body of like how you can think better for having read them is all the work that remains. Like how you link the ideas together, what ideas cross over and correlate.
Yeah.
Not just all these specific outcomes you have to somehow memorize. Of course, that's going to feel a little burdensome.
Yeah, and Doug was talking about this earlier. Is finding a coach that's like experienced. So like a lot of times people are, they don't know if their coach really is teaching them the best way to learn weightlifting. And I think more often than not, I mean, I've watched the CrossFit thing happen. We became an affiliate in 2007 with CrossFit Memphis. And so we had weightlifting under our belts before we started doing CrossFit. And for a long time, it was kind of weird to watch like how some of the things are being coached. And then over time, the average CrossFit coach got really good at coaching weightlifting. So like the standards for the average is definitely improved tremendously. That still doesn't mean they're advanced.
Right. I mean, it sounds intuitive what I'm about to say, but there will definitely be exceptions to this rule. But a good CrossFit coach that probably is good at weightlifting has competed in weightlifting also. If they haven't competed in weightlifting, they've been doing CrossFit for 5 or 7 or 10 years, and they haven't actually competed as a competitive weightlifter specifically, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be good at it, weightlifting guaranteed, but the CrossFitters that have taken some time away from just CrossFit and competed in just weightlifting, they just seem to be better at weightlifting. It probably means
your awareness goes up, right? You're aware of all these other considerations.
Your awareness, your expectations, your just the amount of time that you focused on those lifts themselves and kind of got away from the massive variety of movements that CrossFit offers. It's hard to get good at 1,000 things all at the same time. And with weightlifting, with snatch, clean, and jerk, those are the most probably complicated movements that you would typically find in a CrossFit gym. So taking a little time away and specializing on those and competing in weightlifting and hanging out with other people that are just weightlifters for at least some period of time, maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 months here, 6 months there, that type of thing. The people that do that just seem to be better at weightlifting overall. And I don't think that's I do think that rather is an intuitive thing, but people don't consider it for some reason.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break real quick. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to actually go about getting into a great weightlifting program.
All right, welcome back to Technique Quad. Today we're going to talk about 3 key things that both Mike, who's right over there, and I use with our new weightlifters to get them to learn the lifts as quickly as possible, as well as get them as strong as possible, as fast as possible. So the first thing is an overhead squat test. It's basically going to help them help to know if they have adequate mobility to do the lifts correctly. Second thing is getting them to learn a perfect power position right from the start. And then the third thing is helping them to understand that to get strong, you have to focus on squatting, not on the lifts themselves.
Wow.
One take, bitches!
All right, so the first thing, as I said, is the overhead squat test. If you can do the overhead squat test perfectly, then you probably don't have any major mobility restrictions keeping you from being able to do good technique. If you don't have adequate mobility, it's almost impossible to have good technique. So you got to take care of your mobility first. So if we flip around, look at Mike. What I like to do is start with a PVC pipe, and then the way we're going to modify this from a regular overhead squat is Mike is going to turn his hands out kind of like this and make a little shelf. This makes it where he's all the way externally rotated at his shoulder when overhead, which is going to put his shoulder in a more stable overhead position. And then he's going to try to do a perfect overhead squat all the way to the bottom from there, which is pretty fucking hard. All right, that's pretty good. Okay. Little things, especially if Mike flips around to the side.
Nope, not doing it.
Show us your things.
Go ahead and go again. There you go. Pretty good. So you can see Mike's tilting forward just a little tiny bit. At the bottom, his back rounds just a little bit, and you can see his arms aren't quite vertical. They're a little bit forward. So overall, that's pretty good. Mike's squatting right now with a very narrow stance. He could probably alter his foot position a little bit. If you widen his feet, maybe even toe it out a little bit, he probably could push his hips forward just a little bit and get a little bit more vertical. You can see he's in a better position there, where at the very bottom, his torso was a little bit more vertical, his arms were a little bit more vertical, and his back was less round. It was a little more neutral than when it was slightly flexed in the first example. So you can play with foot position as well. By and large, Mike's pretty mobile, and his lifts look very, very good. Could he improve his mobility a little bit? Absolutely, but by and large, he looks pretty good. So that's the first thing you're looking for with a new lifter. Can they do that overhead squat test? At least kind of good. That way you can at least start using some variation of the lifts. If they look absolutely terrible, go ahead and do it totally wrong. Some people, they're not gonna be able to do it even close to right. They're gonna look more like that, where they can only squat to maybe parallel, maybe not even above parallel. Some people are gonna have a vertical shin, their butt's gonna be way back and bent way over. Yeah, they're gonna look like they're like ready to like take off from flight because they're so bent over. Some people are gonna lean back when they do it. Like if their shoulders are so bad, they're gonna lean back like this.
Oh, the compensation.
That's right. And then they fall over backwards. That's exactly right. So there's a lot of funky things that can happen there. If that's the case, then there's other things that you can do, other tests to see where those mobility restrictions actually lie. We're not going to talk about that today. You can go to the overhead squat technique wad, and I walk you through how exactly to do that specifically, so no need to redo it here. So Google that or go to barbellshrugged.com and type it overhead squat into the search bar, and that technique wad will pop up. Okay, on to part 2. All right, second thing, they have to get into a good power position. And what that means is that you're going to put the bar into a position right along the crease of your hip where the center of mass of the bar is as close as possible to the center of mass of you, which means that the lever arm, physically, mechanically, is very, very short, which makes the weight feel as light as possible. So if we look at Mike doing a snatch, hands are nice and wide. If he
That's the one where it goes overhead?
Mike's brand new to this. We'll let that slide. So if he's doing a snatch, hands are out wide. With elbows straight, you can see the bar is right on the crease of his hip. So when he gets into the power position, the bar is going to basically be in the exact same spot it would be if he was just standing there normal. Because the power position really, all it is he keeps his torso vertical, knees come forward, heels are on the ground, his weight's on his heels, and you can see the bar is hitting right in the crease of his hip. If the bar hits lower than that, it hits down like mid-thigh like that, or maybe even the top of his knee like that, then he's not going to have very good levers. So just so you can see that if you're not familiar with the lifts, we're going to demo each one of those. So go ahead and flip to the side and demo a good proper, good technique snatch from the floor, or from mid-shin rather, like you had plates on the bar. So you can see there, perfect. The only place, in fact, pause in the power position when you do it. So you can see the only place the bar touches him is on his hips, and even more importantly, when he goes to extend into his second pull, the place where the bar disconnects is also right off the crease of his hip. If the bar brushes and then disconnects from the crease of your hip, that's still okay. What we don't want to ever happen is have the bar disconnect from mid-thigh or even from right above the knee. It's never going to bounce off of your thigh. It's always going to bounce is a funny term, it's not technically correct, but it's not going to disconnect from anywhere except the crease of your hip on the snatch. Cleans, similar, but your hands are closer together, which means the bar, of course, is a little bit lower. If you keep your arms nice and straight and you have long arms, you're probably going to hit upper thigh. A lot of people say hitting pockets because that's where your pockets are. You can see Mike's pockets are right here and the bar is touching his pockets. So a lot of people say pockets, or go ahead and get the power position. Again, knees forward a little bit. Right where his arms, elbows are straight and the bar hits, that's where the bar should hit, or at least that's the lowest it should hit. Either it should hit there or maybe even slightly higher if he decides to do a little bit of a row and row it a little higher on his thighs. Both those techniques work great. It's a style thing. Neither one is necessarily right or wrong. They both work. They both produce world champions. But again, what we don't want is the bar to hit any lower. Go and get the power position. Any lower than that is not good. So if he hits mid-thigh again, or even above the knees, that is not going to be a good thing. It's not a good thing for a couple reasons. Number one, your leverage isn't as good, so the weight's going to feel heavier. And then not only that, if he gets into the power position, okay, you can see since Mike's thigh is angled forward, the lower he gets on his thigh, the more out in front of you the weight's going to be. If it starts out in front of you because it's hitting above the knee versus here, that's a good few inches, and a few inches forward and often will cause you to be forward, be on your toes, and then with heavy weight, the bar's not going to roll up onto your shoulders. You're going to miss the lift out in front of you. Okay, so it's going to feel heavier, and you're going to have to fight for it more. Okay, so on to point number 3. Good. Last point is that squatting is what you're going to want to do for your primary strength work for weightlifting. Doing snatches and cleans, especially when you are not that great at them, you're just learning how to do them and you're just working on the technique with light weights, empty barbells, PVCs, or even up to 50 or 70%. That's probably all the heavier you're really going to need to go if you're a new weightlifter, because most of your reps are going to be practice reps where you're trying to get the skill of weightlifting down, and then you use squatting, heavy high bar back squats, heavy front squats. You can do some other varieties, but those are the two primary types of squats that you're going to be doing to get stronger for the sport of weightlifting specifically. So don't try to get strong by doing endless reps of heavy snatches and cleans. That's going to kill how fast rather you learn the lifts. You want to get strong by doing front squats and high bar back squats. Okay. If you like this technique WOD, we have hundreds of other videos just like this one. You can go to barbellshrugged.com, click on the technique WOD tab at the top of the page. All the videos are there in the library. We'll see you another day.
And we're back. We're going to be talking about how to get started in weightlifting as a beginner. So, as we had stated before, if you haven't been doing weightlifting specific training for 2-3 years, this might be you. So check it out. Chris.
Hi, Michael.
What are, as a beginner weightlifter, what exactly do they need to be looking for in regard to like the best program? Like finding the best program, there's so many out there. There's a little bit of confusion.
Yeah.
How do I identify that?
Well, I mean, everybody knows how it feels to see all the options for things you could do. Everybody offers a blog, a program, things to jump into. I'd say the number one thing you should consider is, apart from, is the program actually for somebody like you? Are you an Olympic caliber athlete, been training for 10 years, or are you a beginner? So start there. But also, is that program truly comprehensive? Because just a list of workouts and maybe some recommended mobility exercises is not what I would call a program. That's components of what should be a bigger vision, a grander plan, a more long-term commitment that you're going to work towards.
So not just a list of workouts.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of times people kind of think about, oh, I need to do a program, and all they think about is the list of workouts. So Monday I do this. And they only think about what happens with the barbell. You're saying a comprehensive program is more than just that.
You found a treasure map with no additional guidance on what you should do first, how you should keep that up, how you should feel for this mission. Like, it's only one part of the necessary information that you're going to need to actually arrive at success. In this case, being competitive, or at least being able to snatch your body weight or what have you.
We kind of hit on that a little bit earlier. We talked about mobility, technique, and strength. And so, like, a lot of times the strength and even some technique are kind of addressed in a program. But, in addition to something like mobility specific to weightlifting, you also have, like, recovery and things like that could be addressed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really, you're looking for a comprehensive training plan that is in line with your one very particular goal. So if you're looking to be good at weightlifting specifically, then obviously you should get a weightlifting program. And to your point, that doesn't just mean the workouts. If you look at, again, most blog programming just says, okay, you're going to do snatches, then cleans, then squats, and then pull-ups, and then you're done, or whatever. It's just the kind of the core part of the workout. The mobility work isn't there. The warm-ups aren't there. The cool-down stuff isn't there. There's no rehab stuff there. There's no nutrition there. There's no amount of periodization, and there's many different types of periodization. And it's not looked at in the context of a 4-week block, an 8-week block, or even a year macro cycle. It's really just the workout of the day, and there's value in having a workout to do. But once you are consistent and you have done some workouts and you can follow something like blog programming, then it's time to think, okay, well, now what's the next level that I could go to, and that is going to work better than just simply following random workouts day to day to day.
Nothing wrong with those resources. Just making a few assumptions, like you already know some of these things, and if you're a beginner, then it's okay if you don't, but you need to know that going into that. you can't assume that that's already baked in, that they're considering that. I'd say another thing I think about in terms of what is a complete program is like the most necessary part. The programming and the recommendations what to do are great, but everybody who's ever trained in a training hall with other lifters who have your same goal in mind, they're dedicated, their lifestyle is, maybe they work, they come here, and then while they're in that room, they're dedicated to the craft of weightlifting. They aren't going to do this for 8 weeks and move on. This is their life. They're going to live it, breathe it. There's a lot. That's a really rich environment to immerse yourself in. There's a lot of other data that you pick up on that you can't get on a blog, let's say. Like to experience what it is to be a weightlifter, to see what speed is, to see what a good snatch looks like live. Just to witness it is a whole different story.
I remember when I started first weightlifting, there was a training session just wasn't a time to go work with the barbell. It was in between sets. It was discussing ideas of strength training and why we were doing the things we were doing, and then we were talking about what we were going to do to recover afterwards.
Comprehensive
These
seminar.
were all discussions that were happening. There were coaches in the room. There were other athletes in the room, and we were all working really hard. And the conversations weren't just about like, oh, is this how my technique should look? It went far beyond that.
You talked history and context. After you get through training, you go get a meal and talk about, just how you're going to then go into the next thing. So kind of you build a rhythm and a whole lifestyle around it, which is really amazing. That's really what it takes if you're going to really accelerate your progress, I'd say.
Yeah.
And again, we talk about this all the time with respect to many different topics, but it certainly holds true in weightlifting as well, that you're kind of the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So if you're around other people that have either been doing weightlifting longer than you or just simply better at it than you, which in order to do that, you got to be around some type of community that community prides themselves on their weightlifting technique, on doing the right things right, on doing their mobility when they're supposed to, on warming up the right way, on doing a good comprehensive weightlifting plan. That becomes the standard, and then you will just grow into that model, so to speak, almost automatically. So if you can get around people that are just like you and have the same goal that you have, then you'll kind of just fall in line, and it'll happen automatically, and you won't have to kind of go through this uphill battle of trying to convince yourself to do it.
Yeah, you can feel it. If you're either static, you're being drawn down by the vibe in the gym, or everything around you is actively drawing you up and encouraging you and making you see how you could be better. That's a huge difference. It's like same workout could be on the board, but what is the vibe? Are you being pulled up or down? Yeah.
Additionally, I think being if you're the best in your gym, if you're training and you're the best one, then you're not getting outside and you're not, maybe you're the best in your town. Well, maybe you need to take a trip every once in a while to a place where you're not the best and
even
really
if you're
get
broke,
challenged.
You could be a college student, and that might be what people would say, the object. Like, well, I don't have the money to train. Well, dude, all of us here, like, what do we do when we wanted to go learn? Do we have a lot of money to travel when we were in college to do it? No, but you pack some beef jerky. You take 2 clean pairs of underwear, which maybe you're lucky if you have that in college. I don't know. I mean, we were. You make like $800 a month, and you find a way to go out and travel to go to a place like Westside, if it was me, or to go train at a weightlifting gym, which back then was really rare. But now there's no excuse. In your state, at least there's somebody who knows a lot more than you, and you can benefit by going. So just do it, man.
Yeah, I remember I think the 3 of us, we all made around or less than $1,000 a month
for a long time
when we were in college.
For longer than I want to admit.
So it's like, but we all did figure out. I mean, how many people we cram in a hotel room? Like 8 people.
Fuck.
Oh yeah.
Maybe more. Like people were sleeping on the floor. People were eating cans of tuna. And
one time I made the mistake like calculating my hourly wage, and I was like trembling to my core. I'm like, oh God. Luckily, I'm going to go on to conquer the world with this degree, which I guess I kind of did.
Yeah, so
in my own unique little tiny way.
I guess that's a little tangent about like, if you have an excuse, really, we don't believe that you have that excuse. You can use it all you want, but
you can do it. It's not like
you can't get us to believe that that's
get past
valid.
that. Get past the excuse.
Yeah. How do you, and if you do travel, say you went to Westside Barbell, and how many people go to Westside and they want Louis' attention, right? Louis gets thousands upon thousands of people to go to that gym, and they want his advice and his attention, whether it's in person or over the phone after the fact. Well, maybe that's not the easiest route. Maybe you could just find one of the top lifters in the gym who doesn't have like near the amount of people that are vying for his attention, asking for his training advice compared to Louis, and you can just get that guy's phone number, and then when you go back to town, you can just call that guy. That guy will probably take your call every single time, whereas Louis is probably way too busy.
And he'll help you actually kind of a lifter who's involved, kind of maybe from a practical perspective, maybe from a like here's exactly what to do perspective can lead you through it quickly.
And a good
There are
coach.
a lot of great knowledgeable lifters in these gyms because what are they doing? Some of them might just be walking through the motions, but in the barbell sports, people are at that level have learned and accumulated a lot of information. The top layers of that gym are just a gold mine for you.
A good coach is going to also say with a good plan. So I think a lot of, we're talking about getting around people who are better or getting around coaches who are experienced, but having a discussion with a coach or just finding a coach who's interested in developing a long-term plan for you. Doing 2 months of a beginner program, like we said earlier, and then hopping into something advanced is just not what you want to do. Like every month should build on the previous month and take into consideration what the athlete's done before. And so
do you have any specific advice? Because right there you're touching on that trust issue, right? Like people might know what the right thing is to do, and they get into a program, and what they're going to feel is maybe the real life setting in of like, man, I really want to get better quick, or it's been 8 weeks, how much more of this before I get progress? And this guy's telling me advice. Like, how do you know that you can stay to it? Like,
I think just having a discussion with the coach and asking them why. You don't want to be, an athlete that asks why for every single thing ever
that
all
makes
the time.
You a douchebag.
Is as a coach, you like just do what I say, and there is something to doing just what the coach says. And after they have your trust, a lot of times that is the best thing to do is just say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. I'm gonna go take care of this. I'm gonna do it. But I do think that like you should go, hey, why are we doing this for the next 12 weeks? And they should be able to say, well, during this phase of training, this is all about, more of the general physical preparedness, getting the body condition to train. And then you have this part, which is our big transition period. And then we have this period, which is where we really get to see your 1 rep maxes go up. So it might be a 12-week program. It might be 16, 20 weeks. I like to take beginners through, the first 20 weeks is like you're not maxing out on a lot of stuff for a long time. And there's a reason for that. If someone came and asked me, I could explain it to them. So I think sitting down with the coach and saying, like, what are your goals in the next year are kind of the way to go. And if you need to find someone who's interested in planning something that builds month over month for as long as a year. And if you're not looking further out than 3 or 4 months for, if you're trying to develop as a weightlifter, I'm not talking about somebody who just maybe wants to get a little bit better and so they can do other stuff better. But like if you really want to be a weightlifter and that's something you really want to master, you need to be looking at it a year at a time. And looking at the next 12 weeks only, it's like, all right, we're going to do 3 months, then we're going to max out. And then after that, you're going to go, well, what's next? So I guess let's look at this from an annual perspective, in my opinion.
If a coach can't demonstrate that this leads to that, and here's why, then that's why maybe your trust is maybe founded.
Yeah, but if you can...
If you got this big urge to do something else, it could be that you're right, or it could be that maybe you haven't done enough to reach out and get the answers to those questions.
Yeah, we actually do this at Faction Strength and Conditioning. Our coach, Coach David, he actually makes a little video and explains why we're doing this week. For our general fitness classes, for the CrossFit classes, for the weightlifting.
It works great.
We don't wait for the athlete to come to us to ask. We know that athletes need to have that trust. And so we just kind of preemptively go, okay, we know exactly how to keep your trust over a long period of time.
So a great coach is going to take the time to be proactive and do something like for it. If they're doing that, they're really thinking carefully.
There's some good coaches that aren't as proactive, and all you have to do is ask. So sometimes all you have to do is say, hey, why are we doing this? And if they go, oh, I got so busy I forgot to explain why, they'll appreciate the question if it's a good question.
They go, good question. We'll be back in 15.
They're scratching their head in the corner. It's like, oh, fuck.
Well, you want to be awesome now, right? Right now? Then do this now.
Yeah, just to reiterate your point, the best coaches in the world, they always have a very particular reason why they're doing every single thing they're doing in their programs.
Yeah.
Or how their programs from 1 week fits into the next week, or 1 month fits into the next month, or even 1 year fits into the next year. You're talking about annual plans right now, but if you think about like athletes at the very, very top, as in people that are going to the Olympics, they're really thinking about it in from a 4-year perspective, and then they're breaking it back down from there. So there are people in the world that plan their training out in 4-year blocks, and then beginning with the end in mind, regress back down to all the way eventually to a single day. But they know this day is going to build towards this 4-year goal. So
Right.
1 year isn't that crazy. It's like actually not as long as some people go.
Yeah, I think 1 year is pretty much the minimum. If you're an athlete, like you need to be, because there's seasons, even in weightlifting there's seasons. You have nationals, you have American Open. These are big meets. Even if you're not competing at them, you should be competing at them eventually. And so having those, being in the habit of creating annual plans is a great thing to do.
Well, yeah, once you've been lifting for a while too, you realize that's really like the basic fundamental block, really, of the planning. Because, like, I know when I was competing, it'd be one event a year that you would kind of focus on, and everything else would kind of build to that. That's like the smallest unit. And of course, as you get in your 30s, you realize just how short a year can be. So a year is not as long as you would think.
Yeah,
for sure.
One of the last things I want to talk about is just progression. Have a program that is progressing your strength, and that, again, like we said before, that doesn't exactly mean that you're getting your strength work when you do snatch and clean and jerk practice. Think about that as practicing a movement and a skill, and then strength work, should be, squats, presses, pulls, and a lot of work, kind of you alluded to before, Doug, is something rehab, prehab, identifying where there might be some weaknesses, and a good coach is actually going to be able to anticipate weaknesses. I know that when we look at developing a program for athletes, it's one of those things where we've coached, I don't know how many people I've coached, probably over 1,000 athletes in weightlifting, and it's like we know the common things. We know that there's it's very common for this to be weak, or very common for this mobility restriction to exist. So a good coach is going to anticipate that, and then the program is going to reflect that.
Yeah, a lot of times you can just watch somebody move and then be like, okay, well, you're likely moving incorrectly, or you have compensation because of this weakness, this lack of mobility here, and then you can start working through the process of figuring out exactly what's causing that movement inefficiency, is what a lot of people call it. So what you can do in that case is run someone through a series of tests, figure out where they're weak, and then you can program that in intentionally to shore up those weaknesses before they actually become a problem, which means they would get injured.
Yeah.
You mentioned,
yeah.
Well, you mentioned before, Mike, very curious thing about your former self when you got into the training hall for the first time.
Former self.
Your former self. Maybe you visited him since in a dream state. Who knows?
Maybe.
But in this case, you're in this environment with a lot of great old school weightlifting minds who had a lot more knowledge under the belt than you, and you felt the waves of self-doubt. And that's interesting because just about everybody who takes on this challenge, this is a big call to adventure. Come on, jump in, try to be, well, not try, but this is how you're going to do it.
Right.
If you could go back as an expert to yourself, what would you say to sort of soothe those self-doubts and give you the kick in the ass you needed to stick to this?
There you go.
Hey, Mike.
Man up.
Yeah, like, you know what though? Like, because I
You
made
pull out brass balls and lay them on the table, right?
my whole life, I think there's just certain personality types out there. I've been pretty comfortable being uncomfortable, and I think something that I guess I could pass on to you at home is that you should get comfortable being uncomfortable, but also know that if you are comfortable, you're probably not growing. The most uncomfortable circumstances cause the most amount of growth. So if you're not uncomfortable on a fairly regular basis, then you know that you're probably not growing. And so I think a lot of people think about getting good at weightlifting. I'm going to get good at snatch, I'm going to get clean and jerk, and I'm going to wait until I'm good to show up to a weightlifting meet.
No such thing.
Because a weightlifting meet's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I promise you, going to a weightlifting meet is going to make you better at your snatch and your clean and jerk. And if you wait until you're really good at snatch and clean and jerk, and then you show up to your first meet, guess what? You're not going to hit the numbers you think you're going to hit. Things are going to throw you off. You have to start practicing competing when you start practicing weightlifting. And so once you're able to do a full snatch, full clean and jerk, maybe all you can do is a power snatch and a power clean and jerk. Maybe you can't even do the full movement, but you can do the movement well enough to where you kind of fit inside the rules. You can lock it out appropriately and you can pull it from the floor without potentially injuring your back or something like that. Once you've reached that point, start start practicing competing. Go to competitions. Keep the expectations as this is practice for competing. And a mistake that people make, they may take that advice and they go, oh, I got to prep for this competition. My program has to like revolve around this competition. No, that is definitely don't do that. You should peak like going back to program design and why you need to look at it for an entire year. You should be peaking no more than 3 times a year. You should be hitting really going for big lifts and hitting PRs. The more advanced you become, your PRs are going to become less and less frequent, probably once every, or 3 times a year. So, like, if you're competing and you need to practice competing and you need to get your first 5 weightlifting meets under your belt and you're only, like tapering 3 times a year, you're going to have to do some competitions where you're not at your best.
It's just a way of getting experience.
The point
that's
is
what
not
Macklin
to PR
did, right?
at your meet.
Macklin just jumped into the meets, and that's kind of what started him off, right?
Yeah.
That's when you start taking off.
Highly motivating.
There's programming, there's technique, and everything we talked about. But like I said, what is a complete program? It sounds like it includes this component of being uncomfortable and exploring and taking chances and getting out and getting these experiences.
Absolutely.
Once you start competing, though, your training at that point actually matters.
That's true.
Oh,
you
yeah.
come back from your first meet and you're like, man, I got to fucking step up my game.
Yeah.
Like, it actually matters for real now. It's not just like something you're doing for fun. It's like, okay, now I'm taking this serious.
Yeah.
And that's a massive shift in mindset. Is huge.
Absolutely. And you know what? All the stuff we just talked about, this is exactly why we created the program Flight, the Flight weightlifting program. We saw that there wasn't like a comprehensive thing, or maybe there is somewhere, but we've been doing this for a while, and we kind of figured out this is exactly how this is how I would have wanted to be introduced to weightlifting. I mean, how I was introduced to weightlifting was fantastic, but now when we take people through, it's like, ideally, it's like, okay, in the next year, we're gonna taper down 3 different times. The first 5 months, we're gonna build up for that first time we're gonna actually max out, and it is gonna be comprehensive. We're gonna talk about nutrition, mobility, technique. We're gonna separate these things out in the program. We're gonna assume that you don't know anything. We're gonna assume that your weightlifting training it has not been, you haven't been like focused on just weightlifting for years and years and years. We make the assumption that you're a beginner, and so we saw that there was a lack of that, and so that's where we're like, all right, we're going to create something that is for beginners that's going to take you back to the basics. Because I've trained since 2006, and I've gone back to the basics a number of times. I'll run into a coach who's like, and I find out that I have this flaw, which means that I have to like start practicing like a beginner again. So even if you have been doing it for a while and you recognize I have some big gaps in my game, that's also a really big opportunity to go, okay, I'm going to hit the reset button and go
There's
back.
nothing wrong with going back and being a beginner again.
So I've gone back. When I met Thacker, I kind of had a reset button moment, and I'd been lifting. So we met him in like 2012. So I've been lifting for 6 years, and I hit the reset button.
It's a natural component of just it's a good sign that you're still learning and growing. If you have those moments. If you don't have those moments, well, guess what, man? Go find those moments.
Yeah, so we've spent, our lifetimes figuring this out, and that's kind of why we developed that the way we have.
Yeah, there's no such thing as actual mastery. There's only like approaching mastery.
Yeah.
Like I like the expression mastery is an asymptote. Like if you're a math dork, an asymptote is something that you get really, really close to, but you never actually ever get there. So if there's a line here, you get closer and 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 closer. You never actually get there though. That's mastery. Mastery is an asymptote. It means something that you can always get closer to, but you can never actually ever achieve it. You just get like half closer, half closer, half closer, half closer, half closer, but you'll never actually touch it.
And now that Doug has bummed you out, we're going to close it down.
Math talk.
Oh, shit. Yeah, make sure you go to barbellshrugged.com, sign up for the newsletter. If you want a free weightlifting guide, and we'll kind of spell out exactly.
It's a legit book, son.
Guide is not a good word for it.
Yeah, that's a terrible word.
A tome.
It's like 55 pages where we map out, and you can kind of sit down and really soak in as a beginner weightlifter what you need to be considering. So
you can link to a bunch of videos too.
Yeah, tons of videos, like our whole series on how to do snatch, clean, jerk with you and Alex.
6-part series on clean jerk, 6-part series on snatches. We had a 3-part series on squats, which I'm not sure if that's in there or not. It might be in there, might not.
Maybe.
And then we had I don't remember. And then we had workouts in there as well. You had some of the week's workouts from Flight. Is that right?
Yeah, we did weeks 3 and 33. That way you can kind of see the difference in of different phases of training, and then also, someone who's 3 weeks into a beginner program and 33 weeks in, kind of see like what that progression might look like.
For people listening now, the coolest part might be there's like tons of frequently asked questions, like the most common things that we always got sent in, message like about weightlifting.
The FAQ alone is going to be worth going over.
So even do us a favor and read that section. That'd be great. That way we can all move on.
That's right. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Did you tell them where they could get that thing?
Flightweightlifting.com.
That's right.
Yeah.
Later. Next week on part 2, we discuss the key habits for overcoming obstacles in the snatch, clean, and jerk. We talk about our biggest challenges in the gym. Like if you wanted results faster, you can have them. I'm begging the question.
Does that ever
Do you know
happen
who
to
you're talking to? Are we going around the room and like who's really good at being at these things? Like you're really great at derailment. I'm really good at being impatient. I think impatience can actually be a good thing if you get at the right place.
Says the impatient person.
That's right.
Yeah,
it is not a problem.
Justification at its best.
I'm also the king of justification.
Damn right you are.
And how we overcame them to become the muscular and incredibly sexy podcast hosts you know and love today. See you next week. Join the conversation every week after the episode over at barbellshrugged.com. This is also where you'll find new episodes of Barbell Shrugged, Technique Wad, Nuggets and Pearls, Barbell Business, Get Change, plus new articles every day on our daily blog, written by us, guests of the show, and some of the biggest names in strength and conditioning. So, go there and leave a comment now.
Oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool. Yay, that's so awesome.
Did you like this video? If so, subscribe to our channel and share this with your friends.
And if you want even more free, awesome resources to help you reach your fitness goals, plus some updates that we only share over email, head over to barbellshrugged.com and sign up for the newsletter.